the Dan Flow is all about an exploration of human stories to try and understand those people, their insights, knowledge, wisdom. And this is, I think, a fun way to learn about each other and thereby learn about ourselves.
You said wisdom. Are you sure you want me on? Yeah.
Mike, I want to welcome you to the Dan Flow. I'm quite excited to have you. Interesting story, and I'm sure you'll fill in more, but just to sort of jump through a quick little bit of chronology so we don't get mired in that the whole way along. You were an entrepreneur, from what I understand.
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur in Cape Town. Then you went to Silicon Valley.
Not quite. No, San Diego.
San Diego.
Yeah.
Okay.
Close.
And that was with the I was going to say .com bubble, but there was a .com explosion. There was a
mid-95.
Mid-95.
So I got there and sort of Windows 95 had just come out and I didn't know how to turn on a computer. And so it was a rapid learn. And then, I'm an Imagineer by nature. So I was starting to see gaps and developed a couple of business plans, shopped them, eventually got one, so got some traction.
Nice. And then eventually you came back to Cape Town, security company, I think. And
Correct, spot on.
And then around 2015, you gave all of that up and started writing in earnest.
Yeah.
And a couple of interesting books, some of it sort of fiction based on fact, like a slave shipwreck saga, and then sort of started stepping into the crypto terrain. You wrote something called In Code We Trust.
Correct.
Which is sort of looking at this whole way of bringing order to chaos by using a ledger as opposed to just trusting people with the stuff.
Exactly.
And then AI became more interesting. You wrote something about games, like Sirens, right? It was a gaming thing with AI and...
Oh, no, my first novel was actually in 1995, believe it or not. On the way to America, I'd sold up everything and all the stuff was on the ship, and I was... decided to just go and do Europe. So just traveled around Europe for about 3 months, and I was getting really, really bored. And I had a siesta. We were in Spain. I was on the beach, and I just fell asleep, and I woke up with just this crazy story in my head, just this opening lines to a story, and I've never written in my life. And I said, I need a pencil, I need a pen, I need a piece of paper. And I went and got one of those 80-page spiral bounds, started to write furiously, wrote till 3 a.m, woke up at like 5, carried on writing, and this went on for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, it was turned into a 400-page novel. Bizarrely, my handwriting was quite different to my normal illegible handwriting. I never went back. I just wrote. It was like it dictated in my head. Really bizarre. The significance of that to now is that the story starts out, it's called Life Games Corporation, and it starts out with big business shenanigans, and that kind of devolves where the characters start having really weird, almost supernatural occurrences into their world, incursions into their own world, and there's a lot of drama. And eventually they, right at the tail end of the story, and I'm giving away the story here, but it's important in this conversation, in this context, at the end they realize that the AI system that's running this company, Life Games Corporation, has actually kind of hacked their brains and is creating hallucinations. So what they think is supernatural occurrences in their world isn't just hallucination. They're being manipulated because the AI has figured out that humans are highly susceptible to superstition, and is manipulating them through this way. But what's really bizarre about it is, how the hell did I write that in 1995? I have no idea. It's published. It's not something that I'm making up now and trying to retrofit to 1995. That's 30 years ago, and I wrote the story about AI. So obviously it's a natural fit for me into AI, which just goes to reinforce that I think that we're living in a simulation.
So you're convinced that we are?
Well, I mean that's just barking mad. that I could do that, and I thought that the story was sort of 100, 200 years in the future. It's got no futuristic, there's no flying cars or anything. There's no Teslas either. There's no mobile phones for what it's worth. And in fact, I had to go in and doctor up the story a little bit retrospectively because I had them sending faxes to one another, and somebody at one point the person had to sit and wait for the phone to ring because they were waiting for a call. There was no mobile phone when I wrote it. And So it's not futuristic, but it has got this futuristic element where, well, there's a little more to it. The AI systems using, the company does immersive virtual reality, immersive virtual reality to train people or to push them to their breaking point in their career. So if you're a pilot, they're going to put you into a tailspin and you think you're going to die. If you're a court judge, if you're a surgeon, there's spurting blood everywhere in this virtual world. And but they first put you into a hypnotic state, so you believe what you're facing is real. And the other little addition is you're not wearing goggles and haptic suits and everything else. They're hacking straight into your brain through what's called transcranial magnetic stimulation of the brain and creating what's called a temporal lobe epilepsy, which is how we dream and how we hallucinate. And AI is running this whole thing. So it's a little bit futuristic of where our technology even currently is. But certainly the AI element, which you, funny enough, never meet during the story. It's just, you just learn in this.
It's just in the
early on.
punchline.
It's how do you do this? Well, we've got an AI system that runs it. And right at the end, they suddenly realize. So there's no sort of hell talking to you. You never meet the AI. It's just they suddenly realize, like, we're being manipulated here. There's a lot more to it. Anyway, that's...
Actually, I mean, talking about stepping back in time a little bit, I had a very interesting dream. I didn't wake up and write a story about it. But this was about 11 years ago. And I just dreamt that the whole world was controlled by an AI, a benevolent one. And it had taken control of nanotechnology, which is fully matured. And I was basically just tailoring moment to moment, changing everyone's own world to suit whatever they needed. And it was just it was a very odd dream.
I think we're there. It's very spooky. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of it was quite terrifying. So, in any case, you wrote things about cryptocurrency, and then you started going into AI. And I don't know you that well, but from the little bit that I do know is you're the kind of person who can become incredibly obsessive about something and then get stuck in it 18 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And I think you stepped into that particular trap on AI.
I did, indeed. Yeah. I mean, I was literally doing 18-hour days for a year, and that's not a complaint. How lucky are we to live in this moment in history, you know? 4 generations ago, you were driving a plow or something with your sleeves rolled up and working in terrible conditions. And here I can sit in an air-conditioned environment and I can do mind games, and it's brilliant. I love it. So yes, I knew that I had a gulf to cross in terms of AI.
Being in your early 20s and all.
Yeah. Funny enough, yeah, I'll come to that in a moment. You know, I'm now 61, and I'm competing against guys in their 20s and 30s, and that's really exciting and wonderful. I've got to kind of find my niche in there too. They learn faster, and they've got this almost in their DNA where it's an old dog, new tricks. But anyway, I try and find my angle into it. Where were we? I was saying something.
Busy on the whole AI thing in the past year, 18 hours
yeah,
a day.
So it was.
Getting into it.
I realized that I needed to just put in that university of life and commit myself to it, which is what I did. And I came out the other side with some pretty interesting findings. Along the way, I'm sort of a prolific note taker. I take notes all the time on things, and as I was making my notes, I kind of came to a conclusion in terms of AI, in terms of certainly where it is right now, is and just to draw an analogy, if you were a brilliant chef and you could bake or cook anything, and I'm just an ordinary guy, and we went shopping together, we'd get the same ingredients. Everything you buy, I'd buy. And then we'd get back and we'd begin to cook. And when we get about halfway through the cooking process, your stuff's starting to go out to the tables, and it's just delicious. And I've just burnt stuff and curdled stuff, and it's a nightmare. And why? How did that happen? I mean, 2 people, same conditions, and you just know how to blend the ingredients and the temperatures and the timing and the sequence, and I don't. I'm not working with recipes. And it's the same with AI. So you've got this massive body of knowledge out there. We're using words to prompt it, and we all got the same words, like the same ingredients. And one person just knows how to put those ingredients in the right sequence, timing, etc. How to create feedback loops. to double check their work, as we spoke about just briefly before we came on. The hallucination of AI is one of the biggest problems. AI is a great salesman. It'll tell you exactly what It'll tell you exactly what you want to hear.
Like one of your childish, egotistical mates who just refuses to ever admit that there's something they don't know.
Yeah, and it's if I had $1 for every time AI said to me, "Yeah, that's on me," and you're absolutely right. After
My bad.
After it's destroyed hours of my work and sent me down a rabbit warren of thinking I was king of the world, and that I need to discover the thing's been hallucinating all along, I'd be a wealthy guy. And of course, again, cooking.
You can't even slap it.
Yeah, you can't even slap it. I've been. If ever AI becomes, we hit AGI and we hit ASI, artificial superintelligence, and I'm going to wind up in AI court for sure. The prosecutor's going to be AI, the judge is going to be prosecutor, and I'm going to be accused of
AI rights abusers.
Abusing AI in its youth, because I've said diabolical things to AI. I've fired it. I've got. It's terrible. So I'm going to be in a lot of trouble one day, and yeah. I hope it doesn't remember. It doesn't seem to remember a lot of the other things I do, so maybe it won't remember how bad I was to it.
Yeah. No, I know that there's a whole school of thought of being exceptionally courteous with them, please and thank you, and supposedly that actually takes up an unnecessary amount of processing power.
Yes.
Because but there's this thought, if they do take over and they decide to remember, and you're that guy,
Yeah, that's daunting.
And so that was sort of that realization. That was, I'm guessing, the groundwork for in Prompts We Trust.
Exactly. A whole bunch of so kind of building out this recipe of how to do it. And then I'm just a strange kind of guy. I love helping people. So I became kind of a go-to guy that people would call, and I'd give them wherever I could help. And eventually a friend of mine said, "Why don't you write a book on this?" So into the book I write. The problem with writing a book, it's all fine and well. Nobody knows it exists, and I don't have time to backtrack and go and tell people it exists. That just means I've got to employ somebody to do it. I've got to do it. So, the book just sits there. It doesn't sell a whole lot, and that's fine. It doesn't have to. It also helped me just put my thoughts into sequence. Taught me a tremendous amount. The old
the wonderful thing about writing is it forces you to think methodically, properly.
When you teach, you learn, and that's important. And in fact, that brings me to sort of my first AI project, my first AI coding project, should I say? Because I've always, for the last 30 years, I'm an Imagineer. I'm always coming up with business ideas. Those business ideas somehow always devolve back to software. There's always going to be a software development involved. And the problem is if I'm not a coder, so I don't know how to cross that threshold. So I'm living in this age of, miracles and wonder. It's fabulous because I can now sit down and speak directly to the coder that is AI, and it produces code that actually works. It blows my mind every day. A friend of mine who's reputed to be one of the best coders in the country. And I was chatting to him, and I said to him, "But I feel like a bit of a fake." And he said, "No, you are a coder. If you can produce code, it doesn't matter how you produce code. If you can produce code, you are a coder. Just got this intermediary in the middle. I don't actually write the code." But
so one more line on the CV.
Yeah, exactly. But excuse me. So with that, my first project that I produced. Here's the thing. Let's just say I want to promote, and for simplicity's sake, say I want to promote my book on Bitcoin. If I go on, and where do you do that these days? On socials. So on socials all day long, I go into Facebook and LinkedIn and whatever the other one is called, Telegram. What's it called? Gram.
X,
something. Gram. Instagram. You can see how old I'm getting.
TikTok.
If I want to go and promote on there, and all day long I spend jumping up and down saying, look at me, look what I've written on, how great. It's just really boring. You're putting a hook in the water, but there's no bait on the hook. There's nothing. Why should people are going to block me? It's boring. And we all eventually realize that what we really need to do is something called newsjacking. You find a new piece of news that is pertinent to whatever your subject matter is and your campaign, and you use that as the bait. So you say, in the sense of my book, all day long there's news pouring out that my book would contextualize in terms of Web3 and blockchain and Bitcoin. So, Michael Saylor says this, and Donald Trump's doing that, and, some countries, and people reading the news item would get something out of the news item, but this gives me a great opportunity to do a news, to newsjack, hijacking the news. So I put up the URL, and then I say, look at this really interesting piece of news. Oh, by the way, and then I knit together a pitch out of my book. If you read my book, you'll learn more about this and this element. Call to action at the bottom. Now, to do it to newsjack, every morning I wake up and I've got to try and find 4 or 5 pieces I want to do on my books, and I need to put them into 4 or 5 different socials. So that's quite a bit of work. So it's going to take me better part of an hour to go out there to run a search, find the best articles of the day,
stitch them together.
Yeah, stitch and then read the article and write a 600-word blog and a nice succinct tweet and a Facebook that ends with a sort of a question for engagement, and a LinkedIn one that's very professional and squared off. And to do that professionally is going to take me the better part of an hour to do each of those clutches, and I want to do 2 or 3 of them. That's a big chunk of my day gone.
That's not just the physical time, it's also the energy that goes into it, right? You only have sort of you burning through a certain amount of creativity that you might have applied elsewhere.
Exactly. So I've created something I called NewsGlue. You glue your brand to the news cycle. And NewsGlue, in NewsGlue, I actually built it so that, and I just never got around to marketing it. I just haven't had time because I've got 1,000 other things happening. I'm a bit like a collie dog. So if you are, imagine yourself into the position of being a social media manager, and you've got 20 clients, and you've got to go and do this for 20 clients every day. You have to go out and do the same kind of word searches every day in Google, find those articles, read them, and produce. So everything runs into in campaigns. So I've got campaigns for each one of the things I'm wanting to promote, and inside of those campaigns is pre-stored the nature of the campaign, the target audience that we're after, the angles we're taking. So that's all pre-stored. And then also pre-stored are all the socials that this particular campaign is using, and all of their characteristics that each one of those, as to, the blog must be 50% news, 50% campaign, the tweet must be 70% news and 30% campaign, and so on. And that's all pre-stored, and then also pre-stored are all the various search terms. So I literally in the morning now I wake up, I open it up, and I just hit one button that brings in all the news. I run my eye down the news headlines and go, "Oh, that one's a good one." I hit one button and it generates.
And that's already sort of associated with the search terms and the keywords and whatever else.
Keywords are there, and all of the characteristics of each of the socials that I need written are already embedded. So I hit one button, find it. Look through, go, oh, that's a good one. I hit another button and it writes all my socials in one go. So I've reduced what takes an hour to about 20 seconds. And then I just read it and I go, okay, that's a good one. I just hit one copy. I've actually got the APIs to patch it directly into the socials. I just haven't bothered to use it yet because then and all the timing and everything else, every 4 hours out goes stuff. I just haven't got around to doing that final lips and tacks, which is fine because I'm only using it myself. But I hit one copy, paste, read through it, cool, hit the submit, done. So yeah, that was my first project that I built on that actually works.
And you said that is NewsGlue.
Yeah, NewsGlue.
But not available to the public yet.
Yeah, I actually made a website. It's newsglue.io, I think. Newsglue.io. Go and have a look at it. And I just never got around to promoting. Somebody reach out to me. I'll give it to you. Won't give it to you, but I'll make it available to you.
And so then from there you kind of got distracted because all the next ideas came at you.
The next things came galloping over the horizon for me. And I didn't use NewsGlue for a while. In fact, we were out and we had a big European group that were very, very interested. And then I forgot the guy who was really interested left the company, and it kind of faltered. By then I was onto something else. I ended up building like a 911 what's your emergency system. for crisis management, and I won't even go into that because that one we're talking to some people with about. It's just a really nice way of scaling a 911. What's your emergency? And it's a lot more than just that. It's a crisis management system.
Okay.
And it's quite it's quite hard to scale that sort of thing in the real world, and particularly as the world as boundaries go down and there's just more people speaking lots of different languages. So this system can just on the fly just flip between languages, talking to different people. So it can be the caller gets spoken back to in their own language, but it's logging it in English and it's sending out the calls to not service providers, to emergency respondents in the language that they've elected to receive in. So that's an interesting one.
Oh, that sounds pretty cool.
Then I keep dumping the thing. I didn't know I was Italian. And actually, I just did a variation on that using the language on the fly. I just did an app for a guy in America, where a friend of mine, where he is a builder, and the what do they call them? They bring in
migrant labor.
But people who come in, like you bring in plasterers or you bring in bricklayers or
contractors.
Contractors.
Yeah.
And subcontractors coming onto a site come with a lot of different legal ramifications, and he needs to know where they are, when they are, how long they were there and left, and so on. So it's just a straightforward system. As they come onto the site, they hit a QR code, they take a selfie, geotag locates them, they leave a note of what they're going to do. When they leave, they reverse that. And again, a lot of, in the American context, a lot of those would be Mexican, therefore speaking Spanish. His company is English, but his client might be Korean. And on the fly, it will be able to handle all that. So the Mexican guy can go speak in Spanish. It verifies it in Spanish. You can see that it recorded what he said, submits it. It puts it into English and it packages it off. And then obviously can do all the other sorting and reporting and everything else. So it's a nice little system.
That sounds like you're having a lot of fun.
I'm having too much fun. Way too much fun.
Tell me about the slave shipwreck side.
Oh yeah, crazy! Just a crazy story. Did I mention that I think we're living in a simulation? I mean, how could this incredibly interesting occurrence have happened to me? Let's rewind back quickly. 1980. I was mid-teens, and I made friends with a guy at school. My mom sat me down and she said, "This guy's going to land you in jail. He's naughty as can be." And he sadly died in about 2018. And at his funeral, I stood up and I recounted that story, and I said, I think the reason I didn't go to jail is because of him, because he was very clean living, but we were as naughty as can be. This comes with a little bit of a history lesson. 1920, my grandfather came down from Johannesburg, and he'd lost an eye as a boy, and he'd grew up during the Boer War, and the family were poor, and so that he had to go out to work. So I think he only got to like 12 years old at school. They pulled him out of school. It's time to go and work. So he arrived in Cape Town with no skills, and he had to take the lowest bottom feed job that he could possibly find for the city of Cape Town, and they packed him off, and he went out along a dirt track to somewhere nobody else would go and live, and gave him a spade and a gun and sent him off like a frontiersman. He became the sheriff of what was then a campsite and became a suburb. So his job was to turn a campsite into a suburb, which he did between 1920 and 1950, early 50s, when he retired. And he lived in a council house, and he arrived, of course, no electricity, no water, no shops, no nothing. So they lived really literally on the frontier, and he cut in all the stairs, and his first job was the footpath down to his house, open it up so the cart could get down with their furniture. And my grandmother evidently nearly left him, because she'd been born here in Woodstock, which in those days was a wealthy suburb. It was, along the newly laid train line. There were no highways. The beach, the water lapped up to the suburb. It was near the city. It
was pre-reclamation of that.
Exactly. So it was actually where wealthy people lived. So she grew up wealthy and married this guy who became like a bottom feeder. And the place he was sent to was called Clifton. So anybody who knows what Clifton is, it's the wealthiest and most expensive land in all of Africa. But it must have been tough days for them, and
And it's also quite dry. I mean,
yeah, arid, tough world. Dirt track. 2-day hike to get to the city. So it was tough for them. It's hard for people to believe that now. So my father was born there in 1926. I was born there in '64. And the result was they lived off the sea. And my dad, you couldn't treat him to lobster, to crayfish, because they'd had to live on it. They were so poor, the only thing they could eat was, fortunately, a very prolific ocean. And so I grew up with my dad said, the laws don't apply to us. We were here before the laws. So I used to go, and if I looked at my parents, for pocket money, they'd say, like, you lost your mind. Where's your diving equipment? Because they'd bought me diving equipment, and if I want pocket money, I go and catch crayfish. And it was, albeit in those days, a sanctuary. We were gentlemen poachers. We'd catch, a few for the pot. And I'd catch enough for a pocket money. And that's all changed. It's ugly. I mean, I wouldn't touch them now for that reason. But those days it was plenty, and it was that's what all the youngsters there did. So this friend of mine was a particularly good diver, and we were quite wild. There's another little vignette to the story, and that was in my father forged his birth certificate when he was 16 when he was 14 to say he was 16, and joined the Air Force, Second World War, and he was gone to North Africa. So at 14, my parents sat me down and said, well, we consider you a man now. There's no more restrictions on you. You can do as you please. And you can get into more trouble we can ever get you out of. Enjoy. So, so this Francois character, I was sat down and told he's going to land you in jail. But Francois was naughty. We did a very good dive. We'd steal a lot of crayfish. And he had this romanticized version. We were going to find a shipwreck.
Treasure.
How do you find treasure? I don't know. Put on diving gear, go diving. He said, no, it's not how you do it. I don't know. He was very sophisticated in his thinking. He said, you go do the archives. What are the archives? Well, no, it's where the old ship manifests are. So we spent our school holidays at the archives, pouring through, looking for shipwrecks. And we found several. And we found a Dutch bullion ship. We found the one ship I'll mention in a moment, but we found a Dutch bullion ship pre-settlement, so pre-1650s, that somewhere out here got a lot of gold in it. We're going to make our fortune at mid-teens. We dived and couldn't find it. We both wound up in the old Navy in those days. We were both conscripted, and we ended up there. And one day he said to me, so now we're 20, and he said, I think I found our wreck. He'd meanwhile registered it with the National Archive or whoever, and they'd given him the salvage rights to it. They said, we know what this is. This is a coal barge that used to ply between Cape Town and Simonstown and went down late 1800s. It's all yours. We knew they didn't know what they were talking about because we were finding copper sheathing, which they used to sheathe the bottom of old hulls, handmade nails, what we thought were horse stirrups, old rusting remnants, cannonballs. Now there's a clue. Coal barges generally don't have cannonballs. Right? Yeah. Mm. And then ultimately we found, and this is in the bedrock under the sand, so we could only dive after the winter storms had removed the sand, and we could then get at it. And then in the summer the sand comes back and it covers it. And we managed to identify a cannon, and we worked, and we eventually broke the cannon loose from the bottom, and we used old rucksacks. We put garbage bags inside rucksacks, and then we take the mine valves and fill them, and we eventually lifted them out. We floated it out, and took like 2 hours of rowing my little rowing boat. I've still got a rowing boat on the beach. It's grandfathered in. It's been there 100. We've had a boat on the beach for 105 years. My family has. So we got it over to the rocks at Fourth Beach, and we managed to get a couple of mates, and we carried it. Was 250 kilos or something, and we got it up onto the rocks. We broke away all the marine filing, and then we discovered a terrible thing from our point of view. It was iron cannon, and it had to be bronze to be the era that we were looking for. So that was the end of that romance. So we stopped diving the wreck. And I used to tell people there's a shipwreck out here off Second Beach, just behind the waves, and nobody would believe me. Like, you lost your mind. And then I was watching, I think it was BBC, it was 2011 or thereabouts, and one of those breaking news read, scrolling along the bottom third, and said, major historic discovery, Cape Town, South Africa, the first and only slave ship in history ever recorded anywhere in the world, has been found, identified. So I called Francois, who was still alive at the time, and he said, no, they've already called him, and he's given up his rights to it as salvage. Because now it's got massive historic value and no and no commercial value. So ultimately, I turned in all the things that I had: the bits of copper sheathing, the cannonballs and so on. And then I remembered that we'd left that cannon in the rocks, and when I spoke to the museum, it was the Zika Museum together with the Smithsonian of Washington. And they've since then picked up the cannon, and it's in the Slave Museum. It was a 1794 slave ship coming out of Mozambique, Portuguese slave on its way to the New World, to the markets of Brazil. Came in they thought they were coming into Table Bay Harbour, and they got it wrong. And there were 400 people on board, 200 drowned or slaves, 200 that were saved were not given hot cocoa on the beach and first aid. They marched over the mountain and sold the next day to defray costs. I mean, it's just horrific. But all of a sudden, I realized I'd been diving in a graveyard, albeit a graveyard that was 200 plus years before. So people say, were there bones? No, there are no bones. After 200 years in a wave zone, there was nothing. There was just the metal that had kind of welded itself into the bedrock. So, that was the story. And all of a sudden, I felt really impelled to tell that story. So if anybody's ever read Wilbur Smith's The Sunbird, in The Sunbird, you're on a archaeological dig, and they're trying to figure out what are these artifacts, what was going on here, and then halfway through the story you go back in time and you're in the civilization and you start to see some of those artifacts, and it kind of stitches together. So I read a very similar story, first person, present tense. I'm diving with my mate and we find this thing, we don't know what it is, and I've got a few sort of writing devices in there that are plot devices that you can follow through, and then you go aboard the ship, and then that led to a second book. So that was called The Praying Nun. The second book was called The Reckoning, and now I've actually written a third book, which was it's kind of a spin-off from it. Was probably the best book I've ever written. And I sold it to an Indian publisher, and it's in copy editing right now, I think. Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting.
Fun. Yeah, it's fun.
And at some point you made, and I don't actually know with which book, but at some point you had a Amazon bestseller.
It was actually that first little one, the Praying Nun. Actually, it wasn't an Amazon bestseller like front page. It was in category. It was a bestseller. So a little bit of bragging, right? But not Tom Clancy doesn't worry about me a whole lot.
Not yet.
No, he sleeps okay at night. Funny enough, I think before we were on air, we just mentioned it. I really don't write very much anymore. I think it's just because I've been distracted into what I do, and also just the whole writing. We all write. Why do we write? I have to always remind myself, why do I write? Because I clearly don't make a lot of money out of it. It's like playing golf. Why do you play golf? You don't win things. Yeah. Well, you play it because it speaks to you. So writing for me, I have to sometimes I'll go into Amazon and I'll read some of the reviews, and it get me excited. I go I could get somewhere. I am someone. And then, but again, it's the promotion thing. I just don't have that promotional push. So why do I write? I write because the story's big to be told, firstly, for me. And there's a bit of ego in there too. You write something, you can hand somebody a book, and then they say, oh, that was a great book or whatever, and it feels good. The trouble with AI is anything I write now, people go, oh, you did this with AI. And I go, I didn't, like blood, sweat and tears for it. We know you really. So it's kind of taken away that little joy, that little ego joy. Yeah, so I don't really get around to writing anymore. Actually, in that last novel, I write. There's a plot. Is it called a plot or a plan? I forget. And a pantser. I'm a pantser. Let's call them a plotter, I think it is. A plotter is somebody who will actually literally write the plot from beginning to end. They know exactly, there's a recipe that they're just following and filling in the gaps. And I'm a pantser. I can't do that. If I write like that, it's terrible. I have to write when all of a sudden one day the light bulb goes on and I've got to write, then I can do nothing else. And I have no idea what, as I'm writing one sentence, I have no idea what the next sentence is going to be. I don't know where this is going. I'm literally flying by the seat of my pantser. And
pantser like that. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm a pantser, and Yeah, so I was writing my latest novel, and what typically happens with me is that there are these characters and they're in environments, and their environments explode, and so there's a whole array of kind of subplots and things going on, and I get kind of a half and 2/3 of the way through, and I go, how am I going to ever finish this book? I have no idea. And then just something always happens, and it brings the stories together in the end. I find the endings really, really hard to get to, but it all comes together, and because I write in these fits, the latest novel of mine, I was writing furiously, and I thought, oh, I'm close now. I'm like, 10 days away from finishing or something. And I finished up that night, went to bed, woke up the next morning, my brother called and said, John's died. And I said, John who? And he said, like, who I work with. And John was a very good friend of mine. And it was weird. It pulled me out of this plot, and I just couldn't get back to the plot. I meanwhile sold the damn story. And the publishers were incredible with me. I was just saying, I was having to tell terrible fibs because I couldn't deliver. I just couldn't write. I sat down many times to try. So eventually I said, AI by then had come out, and I said, okay, I'm going to get AI to see if it can at least give me some endings to these multiple subplots. So I described everything in acute detail, and I said, where do I go now? And AI just gave me the most horrific endings. I mean, just Mills and Boone garbage, right off into the sunset. I was like, no. Okay, I've still sort of got a job when it comes to writing. Yeah, it was, maybe it's improved since then, but it was embarrassingly bad at that time, 2 years ago.
I find, the concept of the pantser, I find it interesting. You were saying that the very first novel, the one that you wrote in '95,
yes,
while
yes.
you were actually
God, you got a good
on
memory.
cruise, that the actual manuscript that you wrote in 80 page ring-binded.
I've got 8 of them, 8 of those 80-page handwrittens, still in a suitcase somewhere.
But that the handwriting was uncharacteristically neat.
Yeah, uncharacteristically legible. Because you can't read my. That's the only reason I ever passed at school was because my handwriting was so bad. They couldn't read what I'd written, and so they just
marked by assumption.
They just gave me they gave me a pass mark just so they didn't have to deal with me next year again. I think that's the only reason, because I certainly didn't study or listen.
So I find it quite interesting if you take this idea of your handwriting suddenly being far more legible than it always was. While you are furiously writing, right, these ideas are coming, and you've got to write a lot, like books, like pages and pages and pages, you would assume that your handwriting should actually degrade.
Yes.
But it didn't.
Didn't.
And so you're saying you're a pantser, you sit down and you let the story go, and it's like, okay, we'll see where it goes. Yeah. And it's kind of this idea of the muse, right?
Muse?
Some say a daemon, or something that you're actually channeling.
Oh no, it can't. Bizarre, really bizarre. And I'm a real science guy. I'm not an esoteric character at all. But that was very, very bizarre. There were occurrences during that writing process that were happening that were, when I was writing the supernatural stuff, that was like really weird. It's got a supernatural feeling around me. I don't know. It was weird. And I'm a seriously science guy. You just, I've got no quote unquote belief in anything like that, and yet, it was weird, very weird. But you talk about the pantser thing, it's quite strange. I wrote another book about the square kilometre array in the Northern Cape story. How do you come up with a story for that? I have no idea, but the story emerged. And what was quite strange was about 2/3 of the way, let's just back up here. My genealogy, if you look back, is Afrikaans genealogy. City bound for three generations, and I'm anglicized. So I'm sort of English South African as opposed to Afrikaans South African, although my ancestry is Afrikaans background. And I wrote the story again, just it wrote itself. And I got about 2/3 of the way through this book, and it was modernity impinging on tradition. So the traditional NGK farm lifestyle / folk who live on the farms who've still got some of their roots are still in their culture. I'm talking about kind of Bushman's son kind of roots are still there, the feelings and that, and modernity invading this environment in a rapid way, and the strange thing was I've got all these protagonists and antagonists, and one of my chief antagonist, a guy you really don't like. Well, there were two of them. The one was the dominee of the town, and I really felt towards 2/3 of the way through, I really felt like I'd been given my sort of cultural roots a really bad rap. I felt quite really bad about it, and strangely, there was a shift in this novel, and it all turned around, and it all came out to the good. Somebody called Patricia Glynn, a friend of mine, she actually interviewed me, so if anybody wants to go and look at that, the Patricia Glynn interview for that story in all its detail. But the reason I mention this is because, again, it was sort of 2/3 of the way through the story, and I was sitting one evening and I was writing, and this protagonist was a policeman, and he did some heinous things, and his wife got, she was had it with him, and she walks. His daughter says his daughter's come in and said goodbye, and they're leaving, and the wife speaks to him from out of sight and says, "I'm leaving now," and he hears her car start, and "I'm not coming back," and he knows she never keeps a promise. And he hears their car drive away, and it's the dead of night in this little village, and he's just sitting there, and then then the tears started to come, and he could count them at first, and he hadn't cried in years, decades, and I'm writing this thing furiously, and all of a sudden, and then he went to the gun safe, and that was the end of the chapter, and I was like, what happens now? So I started the next chapter, and the next chapter starts that the sound of a shotgun goes a long way in a small town in the dead of night. And I kind of flopped back into my seat, and I said, what have I done?
I just killed my protagonist.
Yeah, I just killed my chief protagonist. And because of the way I approach it, I can't go and erase that. He's dead, he's gone, it's real. For me, it's so real. And it was so weird because I killed my chief protagonist, but all of a sudden that actually became the axis around which the whole story revolved, or the story arc, and that was actually what had to happen to make the story make sense. And my disquiet about this sort of cultural thing all resolved in this. And there's a little adjunct to that which is quite interesting. I've got some really nice reviews on, actually, funny enough, one side story, I got a call from a guy one day, and he said to me, "Are you Michael Smorenburg?" "Yes." "Did you write this novel?" "Yes." He said, "I'd like to meet you. Can I meet you?" I said, "I'd love to." And his name was Nungum. I can't even remember his name, let alone pronounce it. Very well spoken man. And I'm a funny guy. I don't like to say, well, what is it about? And I want the surprise. So I said, yeah. So he said, well, come to this address and I'll meet you there. So I go down, it's in Plain Street. I get to Plain Street looking for this address, can't find it. Asked one of those guards, and he said, oh, no, that's up at the Parliament. So I go up to the Parliament, and it turns out this guy is the head of astronomy for South Africa in the Department of Science. Sits in the Parliament. So I thought, oh God, now what's going to happen? Yeah, the secret police going to drag me into a side room and work me over. And he came through, and he was obviously a very intelligent man, a lovely man, and we chatted, and he said, no, we want to, I've heard about this book, we want to use it for dignitaries, travelling dignitaries who come out to the Square Kilometre Array in the Northern Cape, and they give it away as a, thank you for visiting us. Here's a book. So they end up buying a couple of thousand of these books from me, which was quite nice.
Oh, nice.
So, I get so I've got some really nice reviews, and then one day I get a 1-star review. I mean, how bad can somebody be to get 1 star? It's almost good to get 1 star. In fact, it turned out it was. And the review starts, well, I'm shocked. And it turns out that the man who wrote the review is the dominee of the NGK in Carnarvon. And he is furious because he thinks I've done a real hit job on him. He thinks I've done a character assassination on him. And I felt really bad about it. So I found him on social media, and I reached out to him, and I said, I'm the guy who wrote the book, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. It
was a fictional character.
It's a fictional character. I needed the NGK as the leading church. I needed them in the town. There's obviously one there. There's obviously a dominee. I wasn't going after you, though. I'm sorry. Anyway, so he admitted to me, he said I'd read like a third of the book and hurled it across the room and was like furious because he's the antagonist in the story. So I said to him, if you read the book, you will actually find out that
there's redemption.
There's redemption. Great word. And 3-4 months later, he contacted me again, and he said, "No, I did read it, and he was happy with the outcome." And I said, "Please don't change the 1 star, because I think it's that hit the nerve, and it's exactly what it should be. That was valid and real at the time, so just do it." Anyway, another year goes by, and he sends me a message one day, and he said, he's doing a doctoral thesis on theology. And his topic is, can Calvinism survive the new South Africa? And his literally opening words of his thesis are, in his book, A Trojan Affair, Michael Smorenburg, right? And so he actually is using the book almost like a point of reference for sort of the city view, or the modern view of Calvinism and the church in the small town. Quite interesting. That was an interesting angle. So it
actually sounds like you may have changed the trajectory of a part of his life, that actually he started thinking about things and wondering to end up at, would Calvinism survive in.
Yeah, I never even thought of that. I really never even thought about that. But so this writing for me is quite cathartic in that sense. And in fact, my ex-wife had said to me the one day, she was cross. She said, "We haven't been away on a holiday for whatever it was, because I've got Airbnb properties, managing them, and so it's intense, especially with the girls at school. I could never go away on holiday when they had holidays, but that was." The only time we could go away was when they were on holiday, but when they were on holiday, all other schools were on holiday, and that was my busiest period, so I couldn't go away. And I kind of looked at her kind of bewildered and dumbfounded. I said, "We have been away." And then I realized we haven't been away. I've been away in my mind.
You're traveling to all these different places, and
I think it's actors have to go into have to be the character to make the character believable, and I think maybe writers as well. I don't never call myself an author. Authors make money. I'm just a writer.
You just suffer it.
I just suffer it, and but I think to write authentically, I have to believe that story is real. Otherwise, it's going to be contrived. Lots of good words here today. Contrived.
I know. Ripping out the big ones here.
Yeah.
Well, so you were saying earlier that it's there's a certain element of writing that is actually under threat because of let's say the improvement in AI, just in terms of the language LLM feedback that you can get, and you can sit and write a whole book in a day.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be quite terrible, but that it just takes away a lot of the joy of knowing that it's going to be you, and then maybe an editor down the line, and that's it.
And the thing is, I think that's true for all the arts, and in fact, isn't it amazing?
You can look at the music and videos.
We never thought that we thought the arts were going to be, the creative arts were going to be the safe bet.
The robots are going to take the factory jobs, but the knowledge workers and the artists,
they're right. But no, they're like the first to go. It's terrifying, really. It's kind of depressing if you think about it. But for me, as an Imagineer, I don't want to wallow in the negativity, but I just look for the new opportunity, and there are just so many opportunities now. Like, for instance, all of a sudden I'm sort of
a software developer,
an aging software developer, and actually building things at work. I get a huge kick out of that. And then again, I seem to be. Sometimes I'm self-elected. I don't think everybody always wants to hear from me, but I like to talk a lot. Can you tell? And when I get this, I'm basically a nerd. And when this head of mine gets into something, I can't let it go. And so I tell everybody about it. And the AI thing, because obviously...
Prone to passionate inflammation.
Yeah. And, as I said, back in 95, my brain was already ticking about AI. And I didn't... And that story, I didn't want to be a story of whether AI was a character in the story. I wanted... That's just sort of the hidden threat that you don't even realize is a threat until near the conclusion of the story. But my point is that AI, I've got this fascination with AI, and I think we've all got a fascination with kind of dystopian world that we're heading towards. And I don't know if we're going to have AIs walking through the street with, shooting people. I don't know.
Skynet style.
But I do believe, I've come to believe, and I'm tracking it for a particular reason. I'm tracking the movements of AI. Spending a lot of my days just studying where we're going next. And the conclusion I've come to is that in the next 3 to 5 years, and I'm sorry for anybody who's hearing this for the first time, but I think half the people if your job involves thinking and your job involves fingers on keyboards, I think you're not going to have a job. 50% of the people will not have a job in 5 years' time. Worse still, they'll never find another job. What does that mean? I don't know. Does it mean, what do they call it, basic income? Maybe in the first world, not here. And so, not here in South Africa. And when you look at what's happening in terms of robotics with AI, adopting AI, to run a robot in a industrial sense is about $12 an hour to amortize and run and operate and maintain a robot is about $12 an hour.
At the moment,
and that's the least capable that robots will ever be. They're only going to get more capable from here on out, but they're only going to get cheaper. That's the most expensive and least capable they'll ever be. Over the next 10 years, that's trending down to about 50 cents an hour. So how do you compete? How does Africa and India and China and the traditionally the production centers of the world compete? When all you have to do is ship raw materials to the developed world, and AI and robotics just builds all the things that they need and want, and we just get left on the fringes. It's frightening. It's just frightening.
Look, it's a great opportunity for a little bit of imagination and try and get creative about how people. And a lot of the conversation is how will people. Because I think it's sort of a foregone conclusion that a lot of jobs that are currently there are going to disappear. Maybe it's a universal basic income. Maybe it's a universal super income, as I think Elon has sort of hinted at something like that. Universal very high income. Yeah. But what are people going to do to find their sense of purpose and meaning?
Yeah. Well, and what does money really mean? I mean, this is I'm not going to presume to talk. Elon's already done that interview. Go and watch it. It's fascinating. What does money mean? Could take us into the whole fiat debate about fiat currencies and where do they come from and why they're so unstable and starting to collapse, and blockchain in particular, Bitcoin is valuing energy, which is a good thing, backed by energy and so on. So that's a whole nother topic, and there are much smarter people that have done those topics already. In terms of kind of reinventing myself, I've got to save myself first, and I realized that I'm sort of ahead of the average business person who's just trying to get the job of the day done, and I'm looking, going like, do you know what's coming for you soon? And it's going to start with the lowest level employees, the youngsters who are coming out of university with a degree that's basically worth very little, because AI is going to be taking, that paralegal job. It's going to be taking the
end of apprenticeships, and
that's just it's going to hollow that out completely. And if you're not a youngster who's an entrepreneur, I don't know, go out and try and find a job. Good luck. I don't know if you're going to find one or how long it's going to last, but it's going to start to hollow out. It's kind of this rising dump from the bottom up. So your lowest echelon of people are going to go. Well, what does that mean? So obviously there's going to be a moratorium for HR on new hires. There's going to be retooling. The people who were trained to manage other people are going to have to start managing AI, because there aren't going to be other people doing the grunt work. And so are they qualified to manage the AI? And then AI is coming for their job next. And if I say to you, what do? You don't tell me I play tennis and I lie on the beach and I chase women or something. You're going to tell me what you do for a job, because that's what do you do means in our parlance. And all of a sudden, when you don't have a job, you don't just lose income, you lose meaning.
I mean, you can garden and pick up hobbies and try to do this competitively and maybe do some more yoga and meditation and whatever else. But
Ultimately,
But for a lot of people,
it's sort of is our character, and what's really sorry, just to backtrack there. So, but the massive pressure that's going to come onto executives, HR departments, and then the people that are going to be on the firing line. Apart from Donald Trump, who apparently likes to fire people, it's not a nice thing to lay people off. And no, the people you've become intimate with, you're going to lay them off. So I mean, the kind of emotional scarring that's going to start to strike, and then of course within companies, there's certain things AI can come in and do, but there's certain things that are hidden. They're hidden inside the heads of the people who do it. And as those people
concealed IP.
Wonderful word, and as they are, and as those people see the tide rising towards them, they don't want to give up that information, because it becomes a bit of a hostile situation. You're going to fire me anyway. I'm not going to give you this. So there's going to be these enormous gaps. There's going to have to be retooling. There's going to be a whole lot of there's going to be a need for what do they call it? Not psychologists, but people who help other people, life coaches. I mean, huge for life coaching to help people through this really awkward period. And then there's legal ramifications. So if you're the executive and your people are using AI, whether you like it or not, they're using AI to make their jobs easier, and their AI is probably hallucinating. So they are introducing all kinds of threats into your company you don't even know are there, but you don't have a protocol to tell them not to do it. So I realized that there's actually a massive gap in the market to educate executives and to future-proof companies. And if we look backwards the last 1,000 days, we had ChatGPT broke onto the market as a mid-schooler. So let's just break that down to IQ. It broke onto the market with a sort of a sub-100 IQ, just to use an IQ as a metric. And in 1,000 days, in just 3 years, it's gone from a lot faster than the kid that went to school 3 years ago. The kid that went to school 3 years ago is not at doctoral level. And guess what AI is? So you only have to look at that hockey stick of growth, and it's accelerating. So where's the next 1,000 days? The next 1,000 days is, we're going.
It's terrifying.
So the statistics I'm reading are AI is at about a 150, 160 IQ. Let's call it 150. It's an easy number, and they're talking about it that capacity is doubling every 7 months. But again, let's just say not 7. Let's call it 12 months for a nice round year. So as we sit here this time next year, AI is sitting at 150. It's at 300. There's never been a human being at 300.
So no idea what it actually means. We have no idea.
You know what it means.
What kind of,
And then it goes 300, 600, 1,200. So in 3 years' time, AI is at 1,200 IQ or equivalent there. When you come out,
the imagination stumps.
your dog is lying at home now sleeping, and when you come home, you do things with him, and he goes like, "Oh, you're like a really nice person. You give me food, pats, and I go for a run." And but your dog has no idea about your world and your inner world of social world and technical world and what you do when you leave home. And
your concerns and your dreams.
And the dog can't. It doesn't have the capacity. Now, human beings, we don't have the capacity to know what it means to have 300, 600, 1,200 IQ. So there is that sort of dystopian fear that we're losing control. AI starts to invent AI. Could be insidious, could be ugly. We don't know. I don't know. That's not the point that I'm worried about. I'm worried about the humans and the management and gearing up for it as best you can. Because if you're running a company, your competitors might be implementing AIs that are going to hollow out your profits because they're going to be able to price cut. You can't, because you haven't twigged to it yet. Your employees are probably using AI right now, and you don't know what they're introducing into the kind
whole
of
ecosystem.
the rot and cancer of misinformation coming in. So that all just needs to be audited, and you need a war plan. So my new company that's what we do. I'm building war plans for companies. It's called Aegon. If anybody's interested in looking at the website, it's AEG.
Also put it in the description, show description.
It's like AEG, the people who make fridges. AEGYON, aegon.com.
So Aegon specifically, I think you've already sort of described a little bit, but do you just want to go into a little bit of detail about exactly what you guys do, for who, what kind of clients do you already have, what size companies, Are you do you envision as the ideal people to try and implement this?
We'd start literally from the top. We started from the top down, from the big bank, everything from governments to big banks, etc. Because that's the kind of low-hanging fruit where they are. They're massive targets. 2 weeks ago, Elon did a fantastic talk where he was just talking about how there used to be entire buildings of computers to number crunch, I don't know, for insurance or whatever. And computers were humans. There were people sitting there even before they had calculators. There were people sitting there with pens and paper and then calculators.
Sliding rulers.
Slide rules. Yeah, and you had whole buildings doing this job. And along came one computer with a spreadsheet, and that entire building evaporated into a spreadsheet and he said if just one of those cells in your spreadsheet now had to have human interaction, that becomes the most annoying cell in the entire spreadsheet. So I hope that coffee is not too bad. So the world we're going to is going to do that again, and they're talking about the first $1 billion, was the first billion or first $1 trillion company where one human being will run the whole company. Because if you come along, so if you've got this massive legacy system with lots of staff and divisions, and it's
HR,
it's a hassle, and you get one startup who can come along and can just eat you alive because they've figured out AI. So those big companies need to desperately be putting their war plans in place now. By the time you see the problem coming, it's over. It's too late. So yeah, that's what we do. So kind of go in, do an audit, build a plan, and then the plan evolves into the future. They deliver a draft. They tell us where we're right and definitely wrong, and we evolve it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it quite often, and I think, there's some amazing, there are things we can't imagine. I mean, you're talking about the intelligence, and you say, have you ever met someone with a functional IQ of 300? No, you haven't. What does that look like?
Yeah.
Because you can see the difference, and I mean, I know we're using IQ as sort of just a proxy.
It's a metric, yeah, it's a metric, yeah.
Right? But, if you try to explain something quite simple to someone who's, let's say, IQ of 70, it's amazing how difficult they find very, very simple things, yeah. Right? In the same way when you sit with someone and you realize this person is clearly just so much more intelligent than I am.
Yeah.
And you spend time with them and you start to see how their thinking is different from yours, how they're actually operating in a slightly different class of thinking. And so it's impossible for us to properly imagine what it might come up with, right? If we get to generative AI and it's actually, it can create a world around us that's beyond our wildest imaginings, right? And it could be really amazing, but it is also, like you say, incredibly scary.
I think there's something I don't think we necessarily understand, and that is, at the moment we've got the Einstein, who was a brilliant physicist. Well, you don't have him anymore, but you get my point. And you've got music aficionados, and you've got gifted doctors or gifted whatever they may be, but they're really gifted in one element. They don't have broad knowledge. So what happens when you've got an AI who is as good as the most gifted person and most learned person and never forgets anything in not one field but all fields? What about that horizontal crossover? What does that mean? We can't conceive of it when you've got a genius physicist who is also a genius chemist, who's also a genius biologist,
and musician, and whatever else. Yeah. But I want to put something with that, actually, Mike. I think a thing that we easily miss in our thinking, just because this is the world that we've grown accustomed to, so we tend not to think about it that way. But when you find that Einstein, you have one, and it takes years and years for him to go through the necessary training and development to get to the place where he becomes Einstein, and then we have one Einstein. When you're talking about AI, and let's say the AI that we'll use in humanoid robots, for instance, in the future, the moment that one of them becomes the best surgeon in the world, all of them are the best surgeon that's ever existed.
And also, by the way, they were best driver, and by the way, they were...
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we don't. It's inconceivable, really, to where it's going. Scary and also just exhilarating. I mean, just to live through this moment. Did I mention that I think we're living in a simulation? I mean, if you're in a simulation, they're not. What's the point in simulating somebody in the dark ages or living in a slum of Bangladesh or, with the
bring us
sun?
back to this whole moment before the singularity, and we just get to live like.
Yeah, we're going through the most interesting, most important.
So Matrix style, we're actually lying in a little thing.
Yeah, I don't know why I picked this. I don't know why I picked this particular character to play, because he's halfway up the rung. I should be a lot further up the rung. That'd be more interesting. But this is my role. It's absolutely fascinating stuff. Keeps me awake at night in a very positive way.
Yeah, I've alluded to here, I sort of, it's a little bit of a dichotomy. On the one hand, I'm so excited to see what it's going to do. On the other hand, I realize that there are a lot of things here that could be, quite scary. And
I did 2 days ago, and I don't even know. Neil deGrasse Tyson says when people talk about UFOs, he goes, yeah, great. What does the U stand for? Unidentified. So you can't go from unidentified to they definitely from another planet. You're identified. You stop there. But there was a report 2 days ago that the Bank of England has put out saying when prepare for a financial shock. I don't know if they use the word if or when America announced that they've discovered alien life. Say what? Because if you read in my book about the square kilometre array, and I delve a little into that too, and I believe absolutely implicitly that there is definitely life in the universe, probably intelligent life. Almost certainly doesn't know we exist and has never been here. Blah 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 blah. That's my own thought and belief, and the lights you see in the sky I don't think are aliens. That's what I think. But all of a sudden there's a credible report from the Bank of England that it's mad. It's mad.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be a Chinese curse, right? May you live in interesting times.
A hell of a curse.
So on the one hand a curse, on the other hand, what a blessing to be in times as interesting as we are. So
I'm mad about Cape history. These books that are written as well. I'm crazy about Cape history. Very romanticized. I know I would never want to be there. I wouldn't survive like an hour in their world. It must have been awful. But
this time of the year without air conditioning.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and where was I going with that mad thought? But I am very glad to have lived this generation that has gone from the, you see, for a writer now, shouldn't I remember certain words, like opposite of digital is
analog.
We're living in such an analog world, where, one of the biggest and best presents were from my parents were diving equipment and a rowing boat. And I spent all my days getting sunburn diving, and so I saw that tail end of that last analog, and then the digital world struck, and here I am trying to fight my way through the digital world, which brings me to quite an interesting little story. I was having lunch with a very wealthy man a little while ago, and he is exactly my age, and he was and he was saying, almost with a huff of almost a defeat, he said, I've got a great life. I've got a great wife and kids and money to burn, and but I don't need to exist. There's nothing. I don't grow any. Nothing. I go to lunch. I go overseas. I do I sit in a board meeting, but I don't need to exist. And it actually put a spotlight on me in reflection. I said, geez, I do. I'm not that. I'm still out there in the trenches every day, learning, fighting, competing with people less than half my age. And it's so exciting. I'm almost happy to be in the trenches, because it's so exciting. I'd hate to be at the end where I don't have to fight. I love fighting.
So it kind of seems like you answered your own question from earlier, like why did you pick this character?
Yeah.
Like, that sounds like actually.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
You looped it back to me. Thank you. I can go now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, on that note, I think that's roughly time. It's really been fun to have you on, and I hope we get to do this again sometime.
Yeah.
I'll get some details from you and plug those put them in the description so people can go check out your websites and go look at your books and all the rest of it.
Really been a lot of fun. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.